So let's start with how to build an online assignment. Assignments can have all sorts of information added to them, including text, images, links, files, and videos. Students can submit their assignments as text only, as video, or as a presentation. You can open an assignment on your computer, then open Canvas. And we're going to show you how to copy the directions and your assignment content into the rich content editor. So let's take a moment and go one more slide, and then I'm let me show you first, and then we'll go to the next slide. So if I go to my demo course here and I go to modules, there we go. And I want to add an assignment. So I have this module already created. If I wanted to create a new module, I would click plus module and give it a name, and I'm going to call it Building Assignments and add. And then at the plus button over here to the right of the name of the module, I'm going to click plus. Notice that there's a drop-down menu, and the drop-down menu has a lot of different types of content that you can add, but we're going to stick with assignment. We're going to click new assignment, and I'm going to give it a name, how to build a new assignment, and add item. Now, in order to put content in here, I'm going to click on the name of the assignment and click edit. Now, let's suppose that you have directions for an assignment in another document that you previously as if this was my paper assignment. Then I'm going to go back here to the rich content editor, and I'm going to right click and paste. And there is my information. That's all you have to do in order to add things. You can see that the numbering did get messed up a little bit, but that is not a showstopper. We can fix all of that without much of a problem. Okay, then you're going to come down here and add your points, and let's say that this is a 50-point assignment. You're going to choose an assignment group. This is what we used to call categories in Blackboard. So I can leave it as assignments, or if this was an essay for an English class or something, or a project, I could choose. So I'm going to choose essays just for the point of demonstration. Now I have to decide how students are going to submit their work. If they're going to submit online, which is what we're going to do now because we've moved to all online learning, I have to choose online from the submission type dropdown. And I can choose the number of options that I want to allow students. I can give them a box like this one up here to type into. I can allow them to upload a URL from a website. I can allow them to upload media recordings. So if I want them to be able to upload videos, I can do that. Or I can also click File Uploads, which will allow them to upload a variety of different media types, including docs and docx. Okay, if you want to restrict file upload types, for instance, if you only want docs or docx, you can check this box and put that the file extensions in the box that you have there, but we're not going to do that. Okay, so this tells students now that they can either type in the box, they can upload media, or they can upload a different file type. If that was all that I needed from my students, I could go down and set a due date and save and publish. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that first. And then, oh, I forgot to give it a title. Whoops. No, I didn't. There it is. So I'm not sure why we're having this problem, but let's do it again and save. There we go. Okay, so now you can see the title that I gave it and the directions. It tells the students how many points, and it tells them what kind of submission type they are allowed along with the due date. Okay, so Perhaps though, I want to enable Turnitin. Let's talk about that for a minute. So Turnitin can be used for drafts so that students have the opportunity to look at the errors that they made and fix them before they submit a final draft of an assignment. It can be set to, the Turnitin settings themselves can be set to ignore things that commonly cause false plagiarism flags. And it can also be used to correct students' mechanical errors, such as spelling, grammar, usage, punctuation, etc. So if I go back to this same assignment now in Canvas and I go to edit, below where I indicated my submission types, there is the plagiarism review, and it defaults to none, meaning that there is no plagiarism review of the submissions. But if I want my students' work to be reviewed, I can click the drop-down menu, select Turnitin, and there we go. And all sorts of options load for me. So now I can choose to store the submissions in the standard paper repository or do not store the submitted papers. So if you want your current students to be compared against future students or other students, then you do need to store it in the paper repository. You can compare against other students, website content, periodicals, journals, and publications, or all. You can check all or some of those boxes. And on the similarity report that comes to you and the student, you can exclude bibliographic materials if you so choose. So anything that falls beneath a heading that says works cited, references, bibliography will be excluded from the report. You can also exclude any quoted materials. So that means that anything that is successfully enclosed in quotation marks will be excluded from the plagiarism checker. And you can exclude small sources, either in words or in a percentage of the document. So in my course, which is US government, I have a lot of submissions that require the names of documents or the names of laws. And so I exclude 4 or fewer words strung together because that tends to exclude some of the names of laws and documents that typically pop up. But I could check any or all of these boxes. You also have the ability to enable the grammar check using ETS eRater. So basically, this is enabling a grammar technology checker for your class. So you can choose advanced, high school, middle school, elementary, or new English learners. Because we are college, we're going to choose advanced. And then I am going to click the English dictionary, and part of this is not loading. Let's see if I reload that. There we go. Both, you can do the US English Dictionary, the UK English Dictionary, or both US and UK. So I do both. And you can enable any or all of these mechanics, spelling, grammar, usage, general mechanics, or style. Once you have enabled this in one of your assignments in one of your courses, it defaults to the same settings in all of your assignments in all of your courses. So unless there is a reason that you want to change it for one assignment, you never have to touch this again once you set it up one time. The other thing to be aware of is show reports to students. Most of the time, you're going to want to show students the report immediately, especially if you are using this to help them the draft assignment that they then have a final draft to turn in. But you can choose after the assignment is graded, after the due date, or never. I don't recommend those. Immediately is usually the best option. Okay, and then I'm going to click Save, and now Turnitin is enabled. Okay. So for your first activity, go into your course, add an assignment that students normally complete on paper in class, copy and paste the directions, choose all the options for their submission, and you can enable Turnitin if that's something that you would use in your classes. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that, and that starts now. Okay, I hope you had the opportunity to do a little bit with an assignment. We are going to move on. How to build an online quiz. So the first thing we're going to talk about is building a legacy or classic quiz. Legacy quizzes are being phased out. We are supposed to have nothing but new quizzes starting sometime in 2020, but with the burden placed on Canvas with the current situation with COVID-19, that may get pushed back. It would not surprise me at all. But there is going to be sometime in the future a time when legacy quizzes go away. But if the functionality serves you right now, please don't hesitate to use them. There are a few functional advantages of legacy quizzes over new quizzes. So for instance, legacy quizzes support the use of Lockdown Browser and Respondus Monitor. New quizzes does not support the use of Lockdown Browser or Respondus Monitor at this time. The reason for that being both Lockdown Browser and new quizzes are external tools, and you can't have an external tool monitoring another external tool. So right now, if you want to use Lockdown Browser or Respondus Monitor for one of your quizzes, you must set it up in legacy quizzes, not in new quizzes. Legacy quizzes also has an accessibility checker built into the rich content editor when you are building questions. That is something that's being added to new quizzes, but right now, if you really need the accessibility checker, if you know that you have students with disabilities, please be sure that you use legacy quizzes. Oops. Sorry about that. Legacy quizzes allows you to create a graded or ungraded survey, as well as a graded or ungraded quiz. And that is a function that is unique to legacy quizzes right now. And legacy quizzes allows you to grade one question at a time in SpeedGrader, whereas new quizzes does not. Okay, so I want to show you a couple of things with legacy quizzes before we go ahead and build one. So when you click on quizzes or click the add a quiz to a module, you're going to get this box that pops up that says choose a quiz engine. And this is fairly new. So if you did any Canvas training when we first converted to Canvas, this was not the case until very recently. But classic quizzes and new quizzes are now in the same box. So you just choose the radio button that pertains to the type of quiz that you want to add. Okay. When you open a legacy or a classic quiz, you're going to see something like the box here on the right with a tab for details, a tab for questions, and a tab for mastery paths, and also quiz type underneath the rich content editor box. So that will be a hint for you that you have found the legacy quizzes. Okay, legacy quiz question types include multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, fill in multiple blanks, multiple answer, multiple drop down, matching, numerical, formula, essay, file upload, and text. Please know that if you choose text as the question type, that does not mean that the student is adding text into a box. It means that you are putting a statement in there that the student cannot respond to. I still haven't figured out a good use for text, but it is in there in the drop-down menu, so just be aware of that. Okay, so let's look at it real quick. So if I go back to modules, and I go back to my building assignments module, I'm going to go to the plus button over here on the right. And from the drop-down menu this time, I'm going to choose quiz. And I am going to add a new quiz here. And I'm going to call it legacy/classic quiz option 1. And I'm going to add it to the quizzes group. And I'm going to add item. Now, before we continue, I want to show you that on my slides, I showed you the box if you add from quizzes. So if you go over here to your navigation bar and click quizzes, you can also begin a quiz from here. If you click plus quiz here, this is where you're going to get the radio buttons for either classic or new quizzes. Okay, but if you add from modules, then quiz is legacy quizzes. All right, so I'm going to click on that. and I'm going to click Edit. And once again, I can copy and paste my details for my quiz, just like I did from the last thing, into the Rich Content Editor, and my directions from my paper test are in here automatically. Okay, you can use the accessibility checker here in the Rich Content Editor, and notice I clicked on it and it said no accessibility issues were detected. So if I have any disabled students, I don't have an issue with anything that I've put in the directions. So far I'm good. Okay, down here under quiz type, I can choose practice quiz, which means that it will not be graded. I can choose graded quiz, graded survey, or ungraded survey. Now, if I choose ungraded survey, just FYI, you can keep submissions anonymous. So if you're wanting students to give you feedback on how the online environment is going, you can allow them to submit an anonymous ungraded survey. But then that also means that you're not going to know who submitted and who didn't. Okay, but I'm going to choose a graded quiz. And in legacy quizzes, you choose whether you want the answers to be shuffled and whether you want a time limit, as well as whether you want to allow multiple attempts and whether you want students to be able to see their right and wrong answers all before you add questions. So I'm going to say yes, shuffle answers, and I'm going to leave everything else alone. I'm going to put a due date on here. Now, I have to go back up to the top and click on the tab for questions to add questions to this test. So I'm going to add new question. And once again, I can copy and paste a specific question from a paper test by copying and then going back in here to the quiz question and right click, paste, and there is my question for my students. Then I can go down here and add answers. And yes, those are all the same answers, but if the first one is not the correct answer where the green arrow is, notice that when I move my cursor down next to another answer, the green arrow is there faintly. I can click on that and that becomes the correct answer now. Okay, so that's how you can choose answers. You can put correct answer feedback in the green box, incorrect answer feedback in the red box, or general feedback in the blue box, and then hit update question. Okay, so let's add one more question just so that you can see that from the drop-down box here where it says multiple choice, these are where you find all of the other question types, whether you want to do true, false, fill in the blank, multiple blanks, multiple answer, etc. All of those will be here, and you also change the points here next to the question type. Okay, and notice also that you have the accessibility checker in each question. So after you complete the question, you can click the accessibility checker and you'll get the pop-up out there as well. Okay, so let's save and go back to our presentation. Okay, so for your second activity, in your sandbox or an old course, add a legacy graded quiz through modules, add a multiple choice question to the legacy quiz, use the accessibility checker to verify the question is accessible to students with disabilities, and save the quiz. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes and go. Okay, sorry, forgot to unmute myself. So when we're talking about functionality in new quizzes, you do not have the questions tab along with the setup screen like you do in legacy quizzes, and you do not have a quiz type, okay? The only quiz type in new quizzes is a graded quiz, though you can check this little box that says do not count the assignment towards the final grade if you don't want it to count, if you just want them to get a score but for it to not actually be averaged into their grade. For now, every new quiz shows a submission type of external tool. Please don't mess with that. That's what new quizzes is. It is a tool right now. And when you save or save and publish, this settings screen that is the second box, what you will see is the third box down here at the bottom right that says build. So the build is where you add your questions and set up your settings. So new quiz question types: categorization, file upload, formula, matching, multiple choice, ordering, essay, fill in the blank or multiple blanks, which is the same question type in new quizzes, not two question types like in legacy quizzes. Hotspot, multiple answer, numeric, true, false, and stimulus. Okay, everything with an asterisk next to it is a question type that is unique to new quizzes, which is not available to you in legacy quizzes. So let's talk about some of the increased functionality of question types that are the same. One of those is in multiple choice, you can vary points by answer. So when you have a multiple choice question, you actually have the opportunity to check this box that says vary points by answer and give various point values in terms of credit to students depending on the answer they choose. So let's say that this is a math question and the answer to the question is -4. If a student gets +4, it may be that they've done the entire question correctly, but they didn't carry their negative and positive signs correctly. So instead of giving them 0 points for that answer, you might want to give them a point or two if the question is worth multiple points for the correct answer, which is -4. You can also shuffle and lock answers on a multiple choice question. So if you click shuffle choices, you get these lock options. So if one of your multiple choice answers is both A and B, or all of the above, you might want to lock those in place so that when answers get shuffled, those don't wind up at the top, so that the question doesn't make sense to students. When you put a numeric question into new quizzes, you have an additional requirement option, which is margin of error. Margin of error is not a requirement for numeric questions that is available in legacy quizzes. And if you choose margin of error, it allows you to put in the exact answer, plus or minus what margin, and you can choose exact points or percentages as the type of margin of error you want it to look at. For essay questions, you get both a spell check option for students and a word limit option for students on their essay questions, which is something that is not available in legacy quizzes. Okay, before we do the activity, let's look at adding a new quiz. So if I am in modules, and I go down to my module, I'm actually going to have to exit modules and go to quizzes to add a new quiz. It used to be a little bit different, used to be in assignments, but we're going to do it here. So you go to quizzes, you click plus quiz, you choose a new quiz, submit. I'm going to give it a name. And I've already got a point value it's defaulted to. I can change that if I want. I can change the assignment group to tests. I can display the grade as points or percentages. Again, I'm not going to mess the submission type. That is what Legacy New Quizzes is. It is an external tool. We can't mess with that. I'm going to give it a due date. And when I click either save or save and publish, it is going to take me here to the build option. But before we do that, I'm going to go back, because once we have it set up, I need to add it to my modules. So I'm going to go to my module. I'm going to click plus, and the quiz is actually going to be under assignments, under quizzes. So it is going to be, well, it was under quizzes. Hold on, that may have changed with the new update. Nope, it is under assignments. I just missed it. We're going to call it new quizzes. Oh, no, it's under tests. There we go. New quizzes demo option 1 under tests. And I'm going to click add item. Okay, so new quizzes lives in the drop down menu of assignments, even though you have to create it over here in the quizzes navigation area. All right, when I go back to this and click on my new quiz, it's going to take me back to the build screen where I left. And I can add instructions here by clicking on the pencil to edit. And just as before, I can go to my document. I can click on my paper directions. I can copy, and I can go back and right click and paste. And there are my directions already in there for me. And I click done. So now I have my directions and I can begin adding questions. Questions are added here from the plus. Okay, so I'm going to choose my question types from the plus, and as I do each question, it's going to have a done button, and we're going to do one of those in a minute. But before we do, I want you guys to go ahead and do this activity. Go into your course and add a new quiz. Remember, you've got to add the quiz in the navigation area, quizzes, and then you have to go to your module, go to the plus button, and under assignments, add it to your module. Okay, create either a multiple choice or a numeric question and use the vary points or lock feature on the requirements. And if you want, real quick, let me show you. If I do the multiple choice, and you have both a question title and a question stem. I wanted to mention that because I forgot that a moment ago. So for my question titles, I usually say test 1, question 1, or something like that. And then the question itself actually goes here. Again, I can copy and paste my question in here and add my answers. And unlike in legacy quizzes, you have radio buttons to choose the correct answer. You can vary points by answer with this check button. There are your boxes, and you can shuffle choices, and there are your lock buttons. You lock them just by clicking. Okay, so go ahead and build your new quiz, and I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, that's about 2 minutes. We're going to keep going. Again, new question types we're going to go over in new quizzes because they are a little bit different than the question types in legacy quizzes. So one of the new question types in new quizzes is categorization. So you are going to create 1 or 2 or more categories, actually 2 or more, and then you're going to create a list of correct answers for each category. So you'll see on my screen, because I teach government, I've got Democrat and Republican presidents. I've got a list of 3 of them. But you can also add distractors down at the bottom so that students don't know if all of the answers actually fit one of the categories or not. So I can add an additional answer to either category here. I can add a 3rd category. I can add, goodness, trying to see, more distractors here at the bottom. You also have ordering, which allows you to order something. Maybe it's the steps to a biology or chemistry lab. In my case, it was Civil War battles in the order that they happen. And you have the option to put leads in for your students to help guide them. So I can put the first battle of Bull Run was the first battle that I want them to start with, and then progress chronologically, and to finish with Lee's surrender at Appomattox, so that they know we're going chronologically from first to last. And you can put these leads in for students or not, it's up to you. Notice that in this screenshot, I have include labels checked, and that's how I get the ability to put these leads in. You can add as many steps, as many answers as you want, but both in the categorization and in the ordering type question, what the students are going to see is a jumble of items, and they are going to have to drag and drop them to the correct place. So regardless of how you put them in, what students see is just a mishmash of answers that they have to either put in the correct category in case of categorization, or put in the correct order in the case of ordering. We also have a stimulus question. For those of you who remember the SAT or ACT, basically that is this type of question. You add some sort of stimulus, whether it is a text selection, whether it's a video, whether it's a picture, whether it's a graph, whatever kind of stimulus you want to add, and you can add as many questions pertaining to that stimulus of whatever question type as you want. So in my case, I have this 80s music video, and I've created multiple choice question to go with it. And finally, the other question type that is not in legacy quizzes is hotspot. Okay, hotspot allows you to take the shape tools provided by Canvas and to outline something for students to click in the correct area to identify something. So if you're doing anatomy and physiology, for instance, you could outline one of the valves of the heart and ask the student to click on the correct valve, and they could do so. The one thing to know about hotspot questions, though, is that they cannot be made accessible. So if you have students with disabilities, you either have to provide them with a different question, which means probably a different quiz altogether, or you need to eliminate the use of hotspot questions because they cannot be made accessible for students. All right, so let me show you how these work. So if I want to add a categorization question, then I give it a name, and my question is, how many steps does it take? Or no, let's see. Canvas Studio versus Zoom. Oops. And I can put a category description, and this is Studio, and this is Zoom. And I can put as many answers as I want in here. Does not caption. Okay, so I can continue adding answers for each category as long as I want. And down here, I can add a distractor. And in this case, just because I'm feeling silly today, we're going to say the distractor is puppy. And I can change the point values. And when I click done, what students are going to see, this tells me what I have set up, but students are going to see all of these options together, and they're going to have to drag the correct thing to the correct place. If I want to do an ordering question, it's very similar. Order the steps to add an assignment. So and et cetera, I can add all of these steps. And because we don't want to spend all the time for me to put those in here, I'm going to do that. I have include labels checked, so if I want to, I can start with go to modules here and click save here to give them kind of some guidance. I can click done. Sorry about that. Working from home, it's always a challenge. Then we have the stimulus question. This is not going to let me do that. So stimulus, I can add my title, my instructions. I can upload media if I want to. I can put an audio, I can record audio or video here for the stimulus or for any other question type for that matter. And then once I have added the stimulus, I get the option to add question types from this button, which would be, essay, multiple choice, whatever I want to add there. And then the last one would be a hotspot. And I showed you before. Let me just show you one more time. If I add a picture here, let's see, what do I have a picture of that would not be, okay, so let's do that. So if I wanted, oh, I thought there we go, open. There we go. So I could choose to highlight the accessibility checker. I could use my little oval and I could highlight the accessibility checker. And if students clicked on that, then that would actually allow them or give them the correct points. But remember that hotspot questions are not accessible to students, which is kind of ironic because of what I chose to do there. Okay. So your next activity in your new quiz, add 2 of the following question types: categorization, ordering, stimulus, or hotspot. And I will see you back here in 2. Okay, I hope you had a little bit of time to look at those question types. I think you'll find actually that some of those question types are really cool. I really like doing them. So let's talk about the settings in new quizzes, because they are different than legacy quizzes. You know, in legacy quizzes, the settings appear on the screen where you set up the quiz. That is not the case in new quizzes. So if you go to new quizzes, you're going to have a separate tab on the build screen for settings. And there's going to be a couple of things to take note of. One of them is that new quizzes allows you to not only allow multiple attempts, but to require a waiting time between attempts. And if you check that box, it's going to give you boxes to set up how many minutes, hours, or days are required for students to wait before they can take the quiz again. Also, in the restrict student result view, if you've been to a gradebook webinar, you may know that you can hide grades in the Grade Center column. You can also eliminate student access to questions and answers using the restrict student result view. This has been particularly helpful for my nurses, so if any of you are nursing faculty, you might want to pay attention to this one little element. Leaving the item on and no boxes checked, as you see in the picture at the bottom left, will allow students to see their submission confirmation or grade, but nothing else. So once the student has turned in their quiz, what they will see is, yes, you submitted, and once it's auto-graded, the grade will pop up in the gradebook, but students will not be able to look at any of their questions, see what questions they got right or wrong, or what the correct response was for any of the questions. You have to, and this is actually kind of what Canvas defaults to in new quizzes. If you check boxes here in restrict student result view, so the show points awarded, show points possible, show items and questions and everything underneath that, that actually enables students to view things after they have submitted and after the quiz has been graded, either auto-graded by the computer or graded by you. So if you need to prevent students from going back and looking at things, you want it to look like this picture. Okay, so before we do an activity, let's go back to our quizzes. Notice that settings is up here at the top. Next to the word build, you have the word settings. And you can choose to shuffle answers. And this is a global shuffle answers in all questions. I'm sorry, shuffle questions and then a global shuffle answers within all questions. You can choose to show one question at a time and either allow or not allow backtracking. That's the same as in legacy quizzes. Require student access code, which we would call a password. Impose a time limit. Please do note, if you're not familiar with this setting in Canvas, that this is a hard time limit. If you say 60 minutes, it is actually going to be 60 minutes and 5 seconds, no matter how often students are submitting answers, especially given the situation that we are facing right now and not knowing what technology your students have. Please consider either not putting a time limit on things, or if you're required to put a time limit on things because of your program, please consider adding several extra minutes, you know, even 10 or 15 if you can, to the time limit, because we don't know how familiar students are going to be with the technology or what kind of technology issues they may be encountering. Filter IP addresses, we're not even going to talk about because you can't really do that from home. You can enable the use of calculators on your quizzes, basic or scientific. And here's where we have the allow multiple attempts. If you check require time between attempts, notice that you have days, hours, and or minutes that can be imposed as a waiting period. And then the restrict student result view. Again, this is a choice. This is Canvas stuff too. If I want my students to be able to see their answers and everything, I have to actually physically go in and check these. And then if I want to show item feedback, which is the stuff that you would put in, you know, great job for correct answer, or I'm sorry, you got that wrong. For an incorrect answer, you can show item feedback as well. But all of these are positive choices you have to make. They are not going to be what the quiz defaults to. Okay, so one more little activity. In your demo quiz, change your settings for shuffling attempts and restrict student result view. I'm going to give you close to 2 minutes, and then we're going to finish up with our last couple of items. Okay, our last item today, I'm going to show you quiz moderation in new quizzes, and then I'm going to go back to the legacy quiz in Canvas and show you moderation there. So when you are moderating new quizzes, you're going to, when you click on moderate, you're going to get a screen that looks like the picture on the left here. It's going to have the name of your students, the number of attempts if it was an item that had a multiple attempt possible, the score for each attempt, the total time lapse for each attempt, a log that is going to allow you to see when they advanced to each question, when they submitted each question answer, the timestamp for when they started the quiz, and the timestamp from when they submitted the quiz. And then it's also going to show you accommodations, if any, that were added, and you're going to have a moderate button at the far right. Notice that accommodations apply to all assessments within the course. So if you alter with this pencil icon, the accommodations for any student in one of your new quizzes, that same accommodation is going to be applied to every single new quiz in the course for that student. You will not have to do any additional work. But one thing to keep in mind is that if you add time to a student's test and what they really have to have, let's say that it's a 60-minute test and they're required to have time and a half. If you add 30 minutes to this quiz, it's going to add 30 minutes to every quiz, even a 30-minute quiz. So there's an option for both actual time, and there is actually an option for a percentage of time. So you may want to choose the percentage rather than the actual number of minutes. Moderate, on the other hand, applies only to the current assessment. So it will allow an additional attempt, give additional time, or the time limit particular assessment. This is where you're going to go if your students get locked out of a quiz. Maybe their internet isn't strong enough and they get dropped, or there's a storm and their electricity goes out, whatever. Moderate is where you're going to go to fix this single quiz without impacting them going forward. Okay, so if I go back to, again, we're still in my new quiz, right? This is where we added the new quiz. You'll notice that you've got build, you've got settings, and moderate is at the far right of these 4 settings at the top. So if I click on moderate, because I don't have any students in here, there's nothing to show, but I can choose to sort by those who have no attempts left, those with attempts still in progress, those who have submitted, or those where auto grading may have failed for some reason. So I can sort all of my responses that way. If I go back, I'm going to go here to modules, and I'm going to go to my legacy quiz now and show you how to moderate there. So if I click on legacy quiz and click edit, well, where did it go? Let's go back. Where did it go? We're having a Monday today. Oh, wait, if I publish and then edit, there we go. Once it's published and I go back, I have the option to moderate this quiz or go to SpeedGrader. So I'm going to click moderate this quiz. And sort of like in new quizzes, you have the number of attempts, the time for each attempt, whether there are any attempts left for this student, their score for each attempt, and then you've got this little pencil icon that I can give them an extra attempt, or I can manually unlock the quiz. Again, this is if they were to get dropped for maybe an electrical outage or an internet disruption. Okay, so that is how you moderate in both legacy and new quizzes. So our last little bit today, your last attempt, we're not really going to do this activity, but I just wanted you to know that the slide decks will be posted along with the recording of this webinar, and you can take a look at moderating information by clicking on this link in the slide deck, and it will take you to Canvas's instructions for moderating new quizzes if you need help with that. So to wrap up today, we have learned how to copy paste a paper assignment into a Canvas assignment. We've learned how to create a legacy or classic quiz. We've learned how to create a new quiz. We have learned how existing question types function differently in new quizzes than in legacy quizzes. Whoops. We viewed new question types unique to new quizzes, reviewed the settings options in new quizzes, and reviewed documentation on how to moderate new quizzes as well. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar today. We hope that these have been helpful for you. We do want to mention that we put resources in all of these slide decks to help you. So all of the options that we've talked about today will be listed in the resources. And we would love to know some feedback on how we did today. If you would take a moment and complete our survey, choose today's webinar on assignments and quizzes in Canvas, we would appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming today. Should you have any more questions, feel free to ask them. In fact, if you want to, you can unmute and ask. I am